Good
Imagine
morning.
a
Welcome
world
to the
without
Community
breast
Calendar.
cancer.
I'm Jazze,
If we could,
and today my guest is Sheila Taylor. She's a breast cancer advocate and a 3-time breast cancer survivor. That is amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Jazze.
Yes, so there's a big walk coming up, Susan G Komen More Than Pink, and it's on October 22nd. But here's the thing, they've moved the walk, huh?
They moved it. It's always been at North Park, which has been something historical really since the beginning, but this time they're moving it to Irving in Las Colinas.
Wow. So it's going to be at the Levy Events Plaza, 501 East Las Colinas Boulevard in Irving, like she stated. Now, it does open at 7 and the walk starts at 8 o'clock. So, of course, if you want to sign up for this walk, you can at komen.org/Dallas Walk. Now, Sheila, if you can, tell me, why did you become a breast cancer advocate?
Yes, it really started when I saw my mother-in-law go through this battle. She was 44, I believe, when she was diagnosed, and I didn't know much about breast cancer. I had participated in races, but I was on the fringes and not really trying to understand exactly what it was until it touched my family. She died 2 years later from breast cancer, and I knew once I was done grieving, I wanted to do something in her honor that would be amazing and something that would help me cope with having lost her. She was just like really a big sister to me because she was so young. And then I was diagnosed myself a year after she passed. So the next year I was diagnosed. She passed in 2004. I was diagnosed in 2005. And I just knew she visited me in a dream. So I knew that I would be okay. But I knew that I had to do something because now I had my own story as well as hers. And I wanted to turn my test into a testimony. So I got involved first with a grantor organization or a grantee organization of Susan G Komen, the Bridge Breast Network. And they provide free medical care to women that have been diagnosed with breast cancer and don't have insurance. And so that's how I got introduced to Komen and started sharing my story through their speakers bureau and attending their events and becoming a race chair and all of that. And so I've been involved ever since.
That's amazing. And you talked about you said your mother-in-law?
Yes,
And she was so young to have it, and for her to find out that she had breast cancer and then 2 years later pass away from it. As African-American women, we have such an aggressive form of breast cancer. Why is that? When she found out that she had breast cancer, what stage was it at?
Correct. And you're asking the right question because as African-American women, we're not always in tune with our health and with our bodies. Those self-exams are so important to do along with screening. And what I learned after she had passed was that she found a lump, but she wanted to ignore it. You know, she was so busy with other things and taking care of her family, she ignored it. So by the time her best friend her best friend was also a survivor, made her go to the doctor, she was already stage 4.
Oh my goodness.
So early detection is really key. Again, self-exams, screenings when you're able to, and just noticing any changes in your body and in your breast.
So you recommend anyone that's listening right now that if they have any kind of changes in their breast or if they feel a lump to get that checked out right away? Definitely.
Please don't wait because breast cancer is not one of those things that, will go away on its own. It will get worse, it'll grow larger, and it could, in the case of what happened with my mother-in-law, expand or spread to other areas.
Oh,
and so you definitely want to get that checked out. If you have a history, you probably want to start even earlier and going to your doctor and telling him that you have a history of breast cancer or a family history of breast cancer so that you can get those diagnostic screenings much earlier.
Right. They start at the age of 40, correct?
Correct.
So if you are...
But I've known several people, including myself. My first diagnosis was at age 34.
Oh.
My sister-in-law, my mother-in-law's daughter, her youngest daughter, is just finished up radiation this past Friday. So again, she's, I believe, 34 as well.
Oh my
So
goodness.
40 sounds good, I guess, for the insurance companies, but you should be doing it much earlier, fighting for that baseline mammogram much earlier, especially if you have a family history.
That is good to know, because most people just wait until they have to do it at 40. You just named a few people who have detected breast cancer before the age of 40. So
yeah,
sometimes
definitely hits African Americans much earlier, it seems. And as you mentioned, it's usually a more aggressive type.
My goodness. And so could you tell us about Susan G Komen and how they are launching a health iniquity to help spread the word for African American women?
Yes, so they have launched, I believe the name of it is Stand for Her, HER, and it's to break down barriers to quality and timely care that will help mitigate the poor breast health outcomes for African American, other minorities, and poor women that don't have insurance.
Oh, I see. And for yourself, you say you have had breast cancer 3 times?
3 times, exactly. I had it 3 times.
When did you catch it the first time? Was it what stage was it the first time?
The first time it was stage 1, and I caught it because I thought I had a lump. Again, I was grieving my mother-in-law who had passed the year before, and I was just convinced I had a lump, and I had to convince everyone else at every stage, and I got to my regular doctor, and then I got to the specialist, and I think I cried in the office because, again, I was still grieving my mother-in-law, and they said, you know what, you're 34, and we'll go ahead and order a baseline. And at every stage, it was, I'm sure it's nothing, your breasts are just dense, and they finally did a biopsy, and it came back that I had breast cancer. And then I was doing fine. I had a lumpectomy, and I will tell people, make sure you're advocating for yourself and also that you're educated about things. And Komen does a great job with that as well. Lots of education and information on breast cancer, because when my report came back, I didn't have clear margins, which means that the breast cancer was sort of like paint splatter. So I probably should have had my breast removed, but I let someone tell me to have a lumpectomy. And so when I think it was about 7 years later, it reoccurred in the same breast. And so this time I had a double mastectomy, and I had to have chemotherapy. And so that was tough. But I remember even there, I was advised you can get, one breast removed. And I said, no, I'm going to get both removed. And I happened to have a breast surgeon that was also a survivor, and she sighed, some relief. She had a sigh of relief. Oh, I'm so glad you agreed to that. It makes sense. And when she took, I think they told me it was 1 centimeter or less than 1 centimeter. When they checked it after they removed it, it was 13 centimeters.
That was the second time you found out that you had cancer? The second time. And so I thought I was good. I had both the breasts removed, had reconstruction done, had chemotherapy. And then I had breast cancer a third time in 2020, January of 2020, which, it was during the time that the world was shut down due to the pandemic. And I had to have surgeries again. This time it came back under my arm, and it was a little pimple that kept growing bigger. And I had it checked out, and I said, hey, and they said, it's probably scar tissue from your surgery. But again, I pushed and advocated, and they gave me another biopsy, and it was breast cancer under my arm. What?
Yes, exactly. So I had the surgeries. I had to do chemo again, and it was 1,000 times tougher because at least the first time I had chemo, I had, my sorority sisters coming with me, church members, colleagues, etc. This time I had to get dropped off at the curb, all of my surgeries and my treatments, because everything was shut down and, due to COVID.
Right. Now, when they found it under your arm, what stage was it then?
It was stage 2. So I was really grateful that it had not spread outside of that area into my lymph nodes. And I think it was a higher stage because of the size.
Wow. That is just unbelievable that you had both breasts removed and it still came back.
It came back under my arm. You're exactly right. I was surprised because I was thinking I never have to go through this again once I agreed to, have both breasts removed. So it was tough. I had to have radiation as well as chemotherapy. And after my first radiation, I think I finally let my daughter go play in a basketball tournament. I also contracted COVID. So during my treatment. So it was tough going for a minute there.
Yeah, but you made it to the other side,
I
and
did. God is good.
you sharing
Exactly.
your story really tells me that you have to be an advocate for your health. That's what I'm
You do.
hearing.
You do. You have to be an advocate, and I became one, a national one, through Komen National Ambassador for Advocacy, to speak for some of the women that may not be able to speak for themselves. They may be in treatment. They may not know what questions to ask, but to go to Congress, to go to our local elected officials and state elected officials to fight for health care equity or any of the programs that are helpful to someone fighting this disease.
Yeah, so what would you say to the patients or women out there who say they may have something going on with their body, but they're afraid to get checked out because they don't have health insurance and they simply can't afford it?
That go ahead and get checked out. Go to Komen's website. They have partnerships. I say partnerships. They are really funding quite a few organizations from donations through the race, their major fundraiser. They're funding organizations that can provide that free or reduced medical care that you need. And like I said, I speak about the Bridge Breast Network the most because as their treasurer, I knew that Komen was funding us almost 100% outside of grants. But I do know that there, you can come in with no insurance and we take care of you from the beginning to the end. We get you set up with a case manager. You're able to be walked through all these things. You get your screenings, your biopsy. They pay for chemo. They pay for radiation. They even have some things in survivorship like the sleeves that people wear for lymphatic diseases and that kind of stuff, things that may happen after surgery.
Mm-hmm.
All of your drugs, those are covered. Okay. So you just want to make sure to understand there are programs out there and you can reach out to Komen or go to their website and find that information for all of those grantee recipients that perform those services on their behalf.
That's great to know. And what would you say to the families who have to support someone that they love that's going through breast cancer? How can they help?
Well, I always feel like in this fight, we're in it, but you're not alone. So no one walks alone in this battle. And so if you are a co-survivor, which is what I call those people, or co-warrior, that you should always stand and support your loved one through this because they need you. They may not even know how to tell you that they need you or how to ask for help, but they need you. If it's something as simple as getting a meal or making some soup after chemo, getting you to or from your appointments, or just getting on the phone and listening to them or having a lighthearted conversation that does not involve cancer. So I just think it's really important. I didn't get through this battle alone any of the times that I went through it. I always had my family, my sorority sisters, my church, colleagues, other survivors. So that's important so that nobody feels like they're walking alone.
And there's new advancements with breast cancer as well. Do you think maybe one day there'll be a cure?
That's what we're always fighting for. That is why I continue to work with Susan G Komen, and that's why I do all the work with these other organizations, because I believe one day we're going to live in a world without breast cancer. I hope so. I have a 12-year-old daughter, so I hope she never has to go through this. But everything that we do, part of the funding or part of the money that we raise goes to, obviously, health care and helping those that are fighting the battle, whatever that might be, whatever assistance that might be. But also a large part goes toward research. And I feel like we're getting closer and closer. And I've benefited from a lot of the research as well as other people. When you first started with breast cancer, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, you only could get, a mastectomy, and it was rudimentary. It was not a lot of reconstruction that you could do. Mm-hmm. You had to take maybe 40 rounds of chemo, and now people are taking 6. So all of that matters and gets us closer to the cure that I feel like we're going to have one day.
That's great. And so that's why it's really important to get a team and help raise money because, yes, as you stated, they fully fund, for the most part, the Bridge Breast Network, which helps women who are uninsured get treatment that they need.
Correct.
And so It's really important. And this is one of the biggest fundraisers for Susan G Komen every year.
This is really their only major fundraiser. That's why it is so important. And I mentioned the Bridge Breast Network. They give money to at least, I know probably about 10 recipients. There's probably a list on their website. I'm only familiar with the Bridge Breast Network because I spent so much time volunteering with them. But there are other organizations out there too that provide similar services on education, screening, actual health care. So again, it's very important that everybody raises money. And if it's $10, if it's $100, as long as you're raising something, because it's going to make a difference. It's going to save a life while we're in this fight.
Yes, and the walks are normally a lot of fun, you know?
They
everybody dresses up in pink and they show so much spirit and support.
Yeah.
And I will say the Survivors Walk always gets me in my feelings, though.
Same,
Where they have the signs up and they're just, have people's
and how many
names.
years they've survived. And it's like, I tell people it's like, and maybe because, again, being in a sorority, it's like being in a sorority that you didn't ask to be a part of. But, you're there and you see other people like you and you just want to encourage them and you want to see them year after year because that means that they're still surviving.
Absolutely. And that's why it's really important to go and get your team together. It is in person. It is in a new location. It's at the Levy Event Plaza at 501 East Las Colinas Boulevard in Irving. It's going to be October 22nd, so save the date. Now, the event opens at 7 a.m., but the walk and the ceremony starts at 8 a.m. But you can sign up and get your team at Komen.org/Dallas Walk. Do you have a team?
I don't have one just yet. I have one every year. I think it's behind the pink because, again, we see all the pink and we see all the pretty for breast cancer. And sometimes you have to go behind that pretty pink curtain to see what survivors and fighters are really dealing with. But I'm going to get it reactivated today. Don't be like me. Make sure you have already done this. If you haven't, get your team started. Let's raise a lot of money. Let's all get on the pink honor roll where you raise so much money that, you're in the top whatever tier. So definitely everybody get started. But again, if you're not going to start a team and you want to donate, you can find my team. My name is Sheila Taylor as well. You can look on the website and donate to my team or someone else's.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and this knowledge and information and how important it is just to be an advocate for yourself and your health. And hopefully we'll have a cure for breast cancer. We're going to just keep raising the money until somebody finds a breakthrough.
Exactly. And I'm going to be praying for that day.
Thank you so much, Sheila.
Thank you, Jazze.